Well, this is the first of the Third Pint Theory podcasts, the pilot episode. Um, I'm Michael Donaldson, and with me is Martin Bridges, and we're your co-hosts. And I would like to start by saying, Martin, why did you ask me if I wanted to do a podcast?
Well, and I thought it was like the golden age of podcasts was probably about 3 or 4 years ago. So it's about time that we jumped into it. I'd been thinking about it for a while. I thought there are various beer podcasts around the world, but I'm not really aware of one in New Zealand. And I was thinking I could kick this off, but really I need somebody who has an existing
Yes,
brand and audience that I can piggyback on, and you've got the marvelous Pursuit of Happiness um, uh, magazine and website and media empire, I guess the Substack.
media. It's a media niche.
So I thought, at the very least, we should have a discussion about whether a podcast would be viable. And it sounds like you were having similar thoughts. Is
That's
that
right.
right?
Yeah, like unbelievably. I think when you emailed me about this idea, I'd been sitting there having promised a select group of people that I would be doing this. Um, just there was always something, like I'm a great procrastinator, and that was the kick up the butt that I needed. But the good thing is, like I don't know, it's not much fun doing stuff by yourself. And when you said, had I thought about doing one, and I thought, great, here's someone who can share this journey, and we're of a similar vintage, I guess, a couple of grey-haired old fellas, and when there's two of us, it's like, well, we've got a small army now, so it's
Yeah, I think I think you're right. I think that there's a fair amount of there's a bit of work involved, and having a couple of people helps
yeah,
with that. But I think also it's um, sometimes you need somebody else to tell you that your ideas are great, and you also need somebody to tell you that your ideas are not so great. So, oh, having that sounding board is I think really helpful in this kind of fledgling
yes,
venture.
yeah. And on that note, we make no apologies for the absolute amateurish nature of what we're doing. We are we're just going to do it. We don't promise that it'll look. There's no boom mics and headphones and fancy studios. In fact, probably the next.
You can see my
Yeah,
Hoover,
yeah,
my Dyson's on the wall. It's
yeah, exactly.
no product placement, there's no sponsorship
No,
uh, in place yet.
but
Yet,
we are going to try.
Dyson, if you're out there and you want to
Yeah,
pay,
but we are going to try and take people to some interesting beer places, meet some interesting beer people. It won't just if you just tuned in, this is your first time listening. It won't just be us. We intend to have guests. In fact, we have pre-recorded one episode already with some guests, getting ahead of the curve. And Martin and I are going to try and get out and about and be live on site with people. But occasionally it'll just be us banging heads and sharing beers, and occasionally talking sport because I know you're a Mad Warriors fan, Martin. So
mad is probably is a good is generally a good description of Warriors
yes,
fan.
exactly. Hey, so I've already been supping away on a little pint here, and I thought we'll try and share a beer or two on regular occurrences of this show, but because this first one has been recorded at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and we both have other things to do afterwards. Um, we agreed we'd start with, I guess, the boom beer category of recent times, uh,
Absolutely.
non-alcoholic. And I
Mm.
think between us, we've managed to pick up, I guess, I would say the two flagship craft non-alcoholic offerings. I'm on the Garage Project Tiny, and interestingly enough, I never buy this beer. My wife buys it all the time. She absolutely loves it, and I'm not such a hazy fan. I prefer the one that Martin's going to fling up in a moment, but I have been really enjoying this lately. I think they've really refined the recipe. They work really hard on this beer. It's the biggest selling beer that Garage Project has, and yeah, it's almost their flagship. And I got to say, I'm really enjoying it. So cheers to a tiny. And Martin, what have you got?
I uh yeah, this was my unfortunately my idea because I'm going to the gym after this, and I thought that a pre-workout drink of beer probably wasn't ideal. So I've got the batch all day, the original IPA. In fact, it does say non-alcoholic original IPA because batch have now got there's a hazy and there's a pilsner, I think, in the all day range as well. And this to me was the the beer that put non-alcoholic beer back on the agenda. I think it's it was the first one I'd had in many years that actually tasted like a beer, and I would happily take a six pack to a party where I was driving, and I'm gonna and I have done. I'm going to work my way through a six pack. I think it's just it really it's not as awesome as a full flavored pale ale, but it's close enough, and it's enjoyable, and I'm I'm really impressed. I mean, it's just the growth of the as you said, Michael, the kind of the no lows, the no alcohol, low alcohol sector is probably the only beer sector that's
Yes.
growing, um, and the quality is just streets ahead of where it was. I remember, and you say we're of a similar vintage. I remember growing up, and Guinness's Caliber was the non-alcoholic of choice, and that tasted like dishwater.
Yeah.
It was like it was it it was purgatory. It was trying to force yourself to drink this stuff, and at that point, I would happily have preferred soda
Yeah.
water
Yeah.
or orange
Yeah.
juice or anything other than that. Whereas as I say, I'll happily drink this.
Yeah. And the thing is, when you turn up somewhere and you've got a can that looks like that, or in the case of the batch one, they look cool. There's no FOMO. You don't feel like you're an odd one out. Um, and yeah,
Mm,
people don't. There's not that kind of. There used to be a stigma about non-alcoholic beer, and there's just not anymore. It's actually pretty cool. Um, and the interesting thing, you talk about the quality, and Batch were one of the first, or were the first craft brewery in New Zealand
mm,
to come out with a non-alc. Um, and I talk a lot to Grant Cornter from State of Play. You know, he's got a totally
mm,
non-alcoholic brand, and he was over in Europe for a number of weeks doing that Camino trail, I suppose they call it. Yeah, walking 800 k's through Spain or wherever it is. I'm not entirely sure. Um, but just his comments while he was there about that the non-alcoholic beers in New Zealand were not as good as the European ones. And I thought,
okay.
considering their much richer history, and especially in Germany for brewing them, and where they make up a larger chunk of the market, and of course Grant's got some bias towards New Zealand because he's in New Zealand and making New Zealand beer, but I don't think he'd say it just for the sake of it. And
Mm,
I talked to someone from the New York Times maybe a year and a half ago about the state of the New Zealand non-alcoholic beer industry, and they were ringing specifically because they'd heard so many good things about it. So yeah, it's quite remarkable down this little end of the world that we're making really good non-alcoholic beer. So yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Cheers. I'll stop dropping my coaster on the
yeah,
table. I think maybe it's a future episode is to is to kind of explore that no alcohol, low alcohol.
yeah,
I think you can beer out into some of the other spaces as well. There's a lot going on in the spirits in the pre-mixed drinks. I remember like the AF brand that is a Kiwi started brand and seemed it had a huge um s- um uh, placement at the Coachella
oh,
festival
okay,
in
yes,
the States
yes, you're right.
recently. So I think um there's there's some real excitement around that space. Maybe we'll talk
Yeah,
about it.
we will. We won't dwell on it anymore now, because people are here for real beer as well. We hope. um, but just a little bit of background, just in case anyone's like lobbed into this from Timbuktu or somewhere, Hawaii or anywhere like that. Um, w- I said who I was. I'm Michael. I'm with Martin. You can see Martin's T-shirt that says "Be a Bigwig." Um, I We'll talk about Be a Bigwig in a moment, but if you don't know us, we'll just tell you a little bit about ourselves. So I have, as Martin mentioned earlier, the Pursuit of Hoppiness magazine, which I publish and edit, and which Martin writes for on occasion, regularly, in more recent years, which is great. Um, and that's got a website, hoppiness.co.nz, and a Friday night newsletter, which is called Friday Night Beers, which is just my outlet for stuff during the week that captures my interest, and a few beer reviews, often sort of three from me and a couple of other guest beer reviews. And so, yeah, that's me. I've been doing this beer writing stuff for, I actually clocked it the other day. I have to keep checking what year it is, but it's like coming up 14 years now since I started down this path. And that's a subject for another episode, about how all this happened, I think. Because it's a long trail of beers that led to where we are now. Um, and Martin, you, as people have probably ascertained by your accent, are from Yorkshire. And is it fair to say that that's the beer kind of mecca in England traditionally? No.
If I said that, I'm sure you'd have a whole heap of people disagreeing. I think look, so I grew up in Huddersfield, Huddersfield as people were saying that in Yorkshire, and there's a heck of a lot of great cask ale breweries in Yorkshire. My one of my favourite beers of all time, Timothy Taylor's Landlord, is from just down the road in Keighley, and then in more modern times, there was as kind of the new wave of craft breweries in the UK in the last decade or so. Magic Rock were also from Huddersfield. Sadly gone through some hard times recently, but they were at the forefront of some of that kind of new wave stuff. So I think, yeah, look, I I I cut my drinking teeth on cask ale, real ale, cask conditioned beer in the north of England, and then moved to London where they don't serve beer right because they don't put Barclay on. There's a there's a whole kind of rabbit hole to dive down in
Yeah.
terms of how you serve cask beer. Um, and I ran uh, a theatre bar actually in London, which served real ale, and got it into the Camera Good Beer Guide.
Yes. Okay.
Um, and then moved to New Zealand about 18 years ago now, I think. And yeah, so I arrived in New Zealand just as that, I guess, the first wave of craft beer was kicking off. At that time, you had Epic and just launched, um, um, and then I got involved in Sober, the Society of Beer Advocates, which was kind of styled itself as kind of New Zealand's version of the Campaign for Real Ale,
Yes, and RIP sober.
and which is where the Pursuit of Happiness came
Yes,
from.
that's
The
right.
Pursuit of Happiness
Yeah,
started as the Sober magazine.
yeah,
So it's there. Everything links
it
together.
does. It does. Um, yeah, the Pursuit of Happiness. It's having its 18th birthday next year, so you probably landed about the time it started. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So that, yeah,
I remember distributing copies to bars
okay, yeah,
and dropping them off. It was back in the day. There were good times. There was some interesting. There was a heck of a lot of has gone on in those 18 years beer wise. You know, we've had uh, uh, some great peaks and probably going through maybe not quite so great a time at the moment for a lot of breweries and bars. But there's some really exciting stuff still going on out there, and some great people for us to talk to and bring their stories to this
yeah,
podcast. So
yeah.
looking forward.
No, and you know, as I said at the start, we're not going to be very professional. Not that we're not trying to be, but we don't promise to be. Um, but one of the things is that I think there might be podcasts that are just Martin with some guests, Michael with some guests, Martin and Michael together, Martin and Michael with guests. We may even go solo. Who knows? But we're going to mix it up. The backdrops will change. The studio will change. Certainly for me because I'm leaving this surround very soon, so I'll have a new space. Um, but certainly anyone who's got any ideas of what they'd uh, like to hear about on a podcast, what they'd like us to talk about, get in touch. Absolutely, comment, send messages. We've got a number of ideas racked up already, and but yeah, crowdsourcing these things is always a great way to go. I always find that the world has much better ideas than I do alone. So yeah, so send them in.
I was going to say, I think that was the key thing we were, wanting to do this together is that it bounce ideas off each other, and if we can get those ideas from outside, yeah, I would love to hear what people want to hear about. Uh, it, we've got we've got ideas in terms of some talk to some brewers about their journey and how they've got to where they are, and some maybe break down some beer styles and talk about that. Um, um, yeah, I'm really keen to hear
Yeah,
what
we could
people
do.
want.
This is probably an oversubscribed space worldwide, but we could do homebrew tips. We've both been down that path, but I
Been a while for
yeah,
me. I mean,
same.
I think I was an avid home brewer, and the thing that kind of probably moved me past that, is that there's so much really good beer available. Um, I was struggling to find time to try it all. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
so there's only so many beers one person can drink in their lifetime,
Well, yeah.
and
Actually, that is one of the reasons I scaled back my brewing. A little bit my job meant that um, more samples came my way, and I got involved in the New World Beer Insider Awards, and you know, every year that sort of I would be there would be a deluge of beers arrive, um, and so I started brewing, went from 20 litre batches to 10 litre batches. I bought myself a lovely little mini 10 litre fermenter. And it was just, it's like, because I didn't need all that beer. I didn't know what to do with 20 litres of whatever experimental nonsense I'd conjured up. So, yeah. But on the,
I do miss that bit. I do miss that the creativity, what could we do with? But there's always a brewery out there coming up with uh, some weird stuff.
Yeah.
And I think we can all name a few breweries who really kind of crank up that creativity meter. So
Well,
um,
we're
uh, what their thought processes behind some of those. So that's, I think, one of the things that we'll definitely want
yeah.
to talk
Well, one of the immediately episodes after this, I don't know if it'll be directly after this, but we're going in to see the lads at Urbanaut. Um, and we'll talk jam, donut, hazy IPAs, and I think their latest one's a bubblegum hazy IPA. It's like if you told me this even 5 years ago, I would have said you were dreaming. Like, what? but but I love it. I love the nonsense as much as the classic stuff. There are some people
Yeah, I think you were saying as well that you were not necessarily the biggest hazy
that,
fan, despite and but I the anybody who knows me will know I do own a T-shirt which is kind of
yes,
red with white lettering,
starts with the word
and
mate.
says "Make IPA clear
Yes,
again." um, so there, having said that, uh, I do love a well executed hazy IPA. I think, and there are some out there. We've just gone through fresh hop season,
yes.
just coming out of that, and we may well still talk about that at some point. But there were quite a few hazies amongst
But
those.
I
So
think we might just close on a little fresh hop uh, moment because
mm.
the current Hoppiness magazine's just come out and the contributors all listed their favourite fresh hop beers of the season. And I think you were with Brave Brewing, were you? Right about now?
I
Yeah.
was. Right about Nelson, the keg only pale ale, because as has been the case for the last couple of years, last few years, the breweries have done multiple. Each brewery's done multiple shops, and Brave did too. They did the Helping
Yeah.
Hands, which they've done for the last few years, and they did the Right About Nelson. And Right About Nelson was only in keg, and I was fortunate enough to be in Punky Brewster in
Oh, yes.
Christchurch,
Yeah.
which is one of my favourite bars. And it was on, and it was stunning. It was the one that kind of things sometimes just stick in your head and go, actually, that's the
Yeah.
one,
Um,
and that was it for me.
yeah, I had some at Galbraith's during an Auckland event called a Fresh Hop, Skip and Jump, which was Galbraith, Small Gods, Twofold, and the Lumsden put that on. Um, I got to say, the Twofold West Coast Pilsner was amazing, but I opted for. I'd say it's like when you have a B side on a record that's maybe better than the A side for people that remember vinyl.
Yep.
Or the B side becomes more memorable for some reason, and so I would say with Hop Federation, the A side was Green Limousine and their IPA, which was fantastic this year, absolutely fantastic. But they did a fresh hop pilsner, uh, and I'm
Mm.
thinking it was with Motueka and Tai Heki, but I'd have to go and find the can and double check. Uh, and that might be the B side, but I thought it was absolutely stunning. I love fresh hop pilsners. I don't know what they just the structure of them. I think the hops, especially Motueka and Rewalker, really suit pilsners in particular. Though we saw a lot of Rewalker IPAs, I have to say. But yeah, I can't go past the really.
It was my second. That was my second
Oh,
choice. I think was that hop fed pilsner. I It was one of the first ones I had, and it was
Yeah.
definitely. I I thought it was better than Green Limousine
Oh, yeah.
this
Yeah.
year, and that's saying something because that's a
Yeah,
classic.
it is. It is.
And it was well executed this year, as you say. I think uh, there's definitely we could spend hours talking about
Yeah.
fresh hop beers, and maybe we will.
Maybe we may do a dedicated fresh hop episode before too long, as Paul Kelly sang. But I I was having a conversation with a brewer who shall remain nameless because it was a kind of off the record joking comment at the end. Because I'd asked him about his particular fresh hop beer and said I hadn't seen it, and he said, "Oh yeah, it's sold out. As soon as we put it up online, it was gone." And that was great to hear. And he said, "Yeah, and we only did one." And his comment was, "I think it's getting a bit out of hand when breweries are doing two, three, and four fresh hop beers." And I was kind of like, "Yeah, everyone should just do one and just put your best one forward. And we'll make a proper festival month out of it, and we can all actually probably try them all. Like it's because when I started writing about beer in 2010, I think there were roughly 70 breweries, maybe even 60 back then. And they didn't make more than two or three beers each in a core range during the year. And it was actually feasible, probably, to drink every craft or micro produced beer in New Zealand if you wanted to. You could have set yourself that task and knocked it off. And like now, I think I would be hard pressed to keep up, with Garage Project's production alone, with 70 or
Yeah,
80 beers a year. And now we've got 200 breweries and they do, you know, I don't know, 20, 30 beers a year. A lot of them, consistently have a new one every second week, every third week. Maybe 1,000 beers getting brewed in a year in New Zealand.
I think the point about fresh hops is a good one because and it's it. I was it last year? I can't remember. I did an article for Hoppiness that kind of was my predictions for the year, and one of my predictions was that fresh hop would kind of settle into kind of one or two beers, and that all this kind of breweries producing five, six, because I remember that
Yes,
Urban
they
Hop
did a
did
mixed six. Yeah.
a mixed six. Um, uh, that all that would go away, and I was completely
Yes.
wrong. Um,
You're sacked.
don't ask me to do predictions because
Martin,
I
no one can predict beer. I just think it's impossible. The one of the things that's happening in America, and we said we were doing a pilot episode and it was going to be nice and short. We can always cut it later, of course. But one of the things that's happening in America is this re-emergence of kind of Radler styles and Shandy type styles. But, in
yeah,
particular, Firestone Walker with their uh, turbo Radlers. And so they're Radlers, but they're 8%, which it's like the whole point of a Radler was to produce the alcohol. But they've taken the
yeah,
concept and blown it up as only Americans can do. And if someone told me that, one of the trends in beer for 2025 was going to be 8% Radlers, you'd go, who's going to
yeah,
predict this?
yeah. You would
Uh,
not have picked that, would you? So I think I can't remember. I think I said that strawberry pilsners were but
they they may
um
yet
I
happen.
it might I hope not. Uh but yeah, I think uh, it is hard to predict where the trends are going. I think that that's a whole episode there to talk about.
Mm,
What are the trends? I'd love to get um to ask some of those creative types. Maybe we'll have a chat to Urbanaut about that
yes.
when we
Yeah,
talk to
yeah.
them, and some others about where they think where is beer going. I think that there are some. there are some macro trends which we can see, which are driven by kind of economic factors. There's the certainly ABVs coming down, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I
No.
think, and it's nice to be able to drink more of something. Um, and some simplification of core ranges. I think there's is
Yeah.
happening a bit as well. I think, but
And I do think,
yeah, well, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to kind of get some wider views on where people think beer is
yeah,
going.
um, probably both to our satisfaction, the lager revival is actually
Mm,
happening. We're seeing that more and more, and later this year, come September, October, we'll see, a lot of regular lagers being joined by sort of Oktoberfest style lagers. I just like the fact that Heyday, for instance, do a new release every month. One's a lager, one's a sour, and it's sort of a foot in two camps of, in some ways, because sours are another, I guess, trending style. They've become better understood, better made, and
mm,
have their place. Not necessarily. I love to have one as a refresher. Um, but yeah, I do like a great lager, and we will have an episode. I'm sure now I've said it, dedicated to lager. Um, yeah.
absolutely.
Hey, before we go, and I am conscious that we didn't want to make this a really long podcast. Certainly not. We're not going to get into the 2-hour territory. Short and sharp is the answer, but we forgot to explain where the name of this podcast came from.
Ah, we did.
Yeah, the Third Pint Theory. We batted
Yeah,
around quite a few names, and Martin came up with this one. And I mean, I like it because it sounds kind of obscure but relatable. Um, and but I'll leave it to you to, yeah,
yeah.
the third.
I think there's a couple of there was two. There's two aspects to it to me. One is that everything kind of the third point is the thing that kind of really opens the conversation and really the social lubricant, that when you get to the third point, that's when the conversation really starts flowing, and that's kind of where this comes into it. I think also I always worry, and my wife worries that the third point is the one that leads to many more pints. If you stop at two, that's all
Yeah.
good, but then three leads to four, leads to five,
Yes.
leads to
Yes.
um, um, but I think it's more that we'll it that's the third point is when things get really interesting and the discussions kind of
Yes.
broadening, and that is what we hope we will achieve through some of these
Yes.
episodes.
So thank you for joining us on our first one, people, and
Mm.
stay tuned. We're not going to drop every week. It might be every second or third week. So say we still have to learn how to even operate a podcast. So you so bear with us, and we love your feedback. So Martin,
Absolutely.
until next time,
Cheers,
cheers.
Michael.
See you later.